Hi, I'm Frankie, and this is my amazing colleague Ricio. We are from Neurodivergent Parenthood, and we've got some really interesting topics to talk to you about today.
Yes, today we're going to talk about what happens when you are a routine as a neurodivergent parent. This is a very topic that we don't talk about very often, but we know how important it is when you're a neurodivergent parent um, to have a routine. And when we feel like things are not working, we know that you might feel being thrown into chaos on a daily basis sometimes. So today we're going to talk about how important it is for you to have these daily routines and what happens when you stop having them, especially Frankie, when we become parents, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, at the moment, this has been very, very personal to me recently. So my husband had to be away for work, and so I had the three little ones on my own. And because we were out of routine, everything just felt like, yeah, total chaos. Like we didn't know where we were. And of course, that led to a lot more like me feeling really dysregulated, but also the kids feeling more dysregulated, and that kind of doubling up to make for a really, really challenging week. And then now, obviously, we've got Christmas coming up. So that is going to be exhausting as well in the same way because even things that are really exciting can also be really dysregulating because it's just not part of the usual plan, and the usual coping strategies that we have don't always work or they don't always apply, and that can be really tricky.
Absolutely. So, Frankie, what do you think it happens when you are out of routine being a neurodivergent parent?
I think there's just a huge amount of, yeah, the strategies that you normally use don't work because they're not available to you. Like the timings don't work, or um, the strategies that are about keeping you feeling safe and feeling calm can sometimes go out the window. Because, for
Yeah.
example, if you're organizing things with other people, you've got your family over, suddenly the time, like you have less control over it. And sometimes
Hmm.
having control and managing something are kind of, they go hand in hand. And without feeling like you're in control, suddenly you've like starting to get a lot more anxious or a little bit uncertain about what's going on. So I think that the idea of sort of your safe space disappears.
Hmm.
You suddenly have loads of people in your house, or you're not even in your house. Where is your safe space? And I think when that goes, that creates a lot more like tension and anxiety. So there's obviously like less opportunity to get away from things as well. So I feel like that can be really challenging, even just from your own perspective, let alone thinking about your kids' needs as well. I don't know. What do you think, Rocio?
Yes, what you said just made me think and remember, like when I was thinking when you were talking, is just for such a long time I felt as a neurodivergent parent that I was definitely out of routine all the time. So losing routine, it's not that I was losing in the routine, it's like it was just there was the constant feeling. And probably a lot of the yeah people, and you're watching us right now, that you might feel like that. Like basically I remember the feeling of like this internal chaos. Like I never knew what was going on with me internally. I was feeling anxious all the time. I wasn't really sure what to do next because I didn't have like a structure, especially after having my son. Mika was born, and all of the previous things that were working for me, as in going to bed late because I was doing things at the last minute for work, I couldn't just keep up with them anymore because I had this baby and I needed to feed him and I needed to like manage like his routines and his times
Mm.
to get things done. With mine, they were always a bit chaotic anyway, so I never really had like a routine as such. So it was just, what do I do? And the feeling I remember is like chaos inside. Like I didn't know what was going on with me, and this, how I was always feeling confused and what was happening externally. Like also things weren't working in a day-to-day basis. Also, I didn't have like a certain order to do things. So it was both.
Mm. And I think part of that routine, like the things that are most important to me in my head about a routine is like having having the basics there. Like, when you're out of routine, you notice it quicker. Like it's easier to
Mm.
forget, like, oh my God, I didn't eat today, or I didn't leave myself enough time to sleep. Like, that those basics
Mm.
they're not even self-care. They're like before self-care. They're just that sort of like earliest Maslow's hierarchy of needs, taking care of yourself as a human. And I
Mm.
think that can go out the window because it's so ad hoc when you're out of routine. But I
Mm.
think that having that as part of your routine is just so essential. And as well, the other thing I mentioned before was just about having safe spaces, having an opportunity to retreat. And I think unless you know where is my safe space, where is it that I haven't got those demands, that I can just be me or just regulate or calm myself. And a safe space doesn't have to be somewhere physical. It could be somewhere physical, but it could be somewhere like an activity that you do or something else that makes you feel safe and calm. And I think unless that is actually integral to your routine, it's not going to be, your routine's not going to be successful.
Absolutely. And why do you think it's so important, particularly for a neurodivergent person and parent, to have a routine? Do you think it's special, it's important for everyone? Or is as the same, or like is it even more important maybe for being neurodivergent? How do you
I think
see it?
definitely. And I think all the parents out there, all of you guys, you'll know how like what the absolute chaos that descends unless you have some semblance of control over it.
Mm,
So definitely. And I think it's so closely linked to those kind of regulation, that dysregulation that you're just not feeling, that you're feeling like heightened, you're up here and you haven't provided enough breaks for yourself that have allowed yourself to come back down. And getting the basics right. And then on top of that, the layers of things that you do for your children, like remembering to take them to the right place at the right time. And, those things, they just have to be part of a routine. It's so important. And yeah, and I think that is particularly, it's that things start to go wrong and you start to make more mistakes. There are
mm,
more fuck ups in your life. That happens more when there
mm.
isn't a routine or when you're out of routine as well.
Yeah, absolutely. You made me think also like of what we talked about in our last video. Watch it if you haven't watched it yet, last week. How does it feel like not like that you are acknowledging that you're neurodivergent and a neurodivergent person? And I remember that when I had to come to terms with my diagnosis and my assessment for ADHD, I started making sense of certain things. For instance, like I never knew how important for me and how easy it was school because of having a certain schedule to do things. And I remember when I went to university, I stopped having that routine of like knowing exactly how to study for things, when the tests were going to be, and things were a lot more structured. But when you start being more independent as an adult and society expects you to be having more autonomous, and you're neurodivergent, and you don't have these external structures or routines in which at this time I need to go to school, at this time I need to come back, and this really difficult. And I remember like I was feeling so lost for such a long time. So the feeling of like being lost, not like almost like not having any signals around me to give me orientation. It's like you're kind of driving in this road and there's no kind of names of streets. There's nothing to give you a sense of where I'm at. And that's how I felt for such a long time. And maybe it's that you watching this video so are feeling maybe. And I started realizing how important it was for me to start creating structures. So because I didn't have them anymore, and people and workplaces, like my relationships, they were expecting me to be able to orientate myself, and I didn't have that. I had to slowly putting certain routines in place that they were starting to work for me. So I didn't, before that, I remember I didn't have a clue how important this was for me, you know?
Yeah, that's really interesting. And it makes you think about the idea of niche construction. So if you're watching and you've not heard this phrase before, me and Rocio love this idea. It's like the idea that as an adult, you think about your neurodivergence when you're thinking about the life that you're trying to create, whether or not that's like your social or your hobbies or your job particularly, or your parenting style. And niche construction is where you kind of you find those parts of your life and you build those parts of your life which make sense with the things that you're really good at, but also the things that you find really tricky. And I'm very, very similar to what Lucy was saying. So my husband, he doesn't mind me sharing, he's ADHD as well. And he'd always been a teacher, and he'd had years and years of like literally it gets to September 5th and he kind of knows what he's going to do in February first period on a Tuesday. He knows what he's doing. It's already booked, you know, like it's planned
Mhm.
out for him.
Yeah.
And it suits him so well. And then a couple of years ago, he moved into a very different role, of sort of like training up teachers. And suddenly he had to build his own schedule. And at least, literally, I'm sure you'd agree, but at least once a week, I would hear him be like, "Oh shit, I'm supposed to be in a meeting," and he just missed it because it just wasn't coming in. It wasn't part of that systematic routine.
Mm.
Um, and he was talking, reflecting with me about like, oh my God, I didn't realize how important that was for me. Whereas in my own job, I work for myself entirely now, and I love lots of it, and I can manage that.
Mm.
I can normally manage the routine thing, but I have to be very strict. Like I have to move to a different part of my house because that means I started work, and I have to be very clear about when I'm going to have lunch because that means,
Mm.
because if you lose that, then you lose a lot of things very quickly. Obviously, let's
Mm.
kind of talk about it in the field of work, but it just applies. Sorry, it applies so much to your life as a parent as well. Like just for children, when yeah, for us the other week, it was just we were waking up at a slightly different time because our start time was going to be different because Daddy wasn't there that week, like he was away working, and what that kind of meant for us as a family. Um, and interesting is discovering you discovered different pressure points, different bits of the day that wound you up differently, or
Mm.
I had less energy to think about food, which meant food ended up being later, which meant we were out of
Mm.
routine and they weren't in bed on time, and it's very much so like when you have a routine, keeps you safe and keeps you
Mm.
in control, but also
Mm.
it's about how resistant is it to change or something being different. It's like a set of dominoes sometimes, like one thing goes and everything just falls over as well. So I think that
Yeah,
really it layers up, doesn't it?
absolutely. You said this last bit, last phrase that you used, like made me like wonder, like what do you think we could say to someone, like probably someone that is watching you, watching this episode, this video, and you're feeling out of control, like you're feeling that your routine is not working and you're a neurodivergent parent. What can we say to them, Frankie? Like, you think what things could work for a neurodivergent parent that is feeling out of control, that is feeling the routine fell apart, or they maybe never had a routine before, and they really need to start setting it up? What do you think it will work for them to start doing this?
Such a good question. I think for me, the main ones are uh how have you created like a sense of such importance in your routine of things that are going to keep you regulated, like when you eat and when you sleep. Those things are just so,
Mm.
so important. And for me, another one is just having a thought about what do you have control over and what do you not? There's this kind of this model in
Mm.
psychology, locus of
Mm.
control, thinking about I have total control over this, I have some control over this, I've got no control over that, and kind of
Mm.
being aware of that. And the things that you can control, that can be part of your routine. Things you can't, you have to be able to make adjustments for. And yeah, the last one, as I said before, making sure that you protect a sense of safety or security or belonging. That's really important to you. Those would be my ones, but I'm sure you've got some other ideas as well, Ricia. What would you suggest to our
Uh,
audience?
yeah, thank you. I was wondering about it while we use after, like, while I was listening to you, and I think it's good to start with a kind of really explorative mindset, because when you're out of control or out of routine, you don't know maybe exactly why things are not working, especially if you never
Mhm.
had like a consistent routine yourself. So it's good for me and for someone else, like for everyone else, I think it's neurodivergent, and they never gotten through this explorative mindset of like, I'm gonna see what things are important for me to keep me with a sense of balance, safety, and in control. So start kind of screening your life a little bit to start exploring, okay, what is important for me to feel physically in a good place?
Yeah.
I was kind of for a long time really oblivious to the fact that how much sleeping, eating, like physical regulation mattered to me. It's like, oh, the physical exercise, how much I kept myself stimulated enough as a neurodivergent person. And now I kind of having that awareness, like, okay, so basically if I don't sleep enough and I slept like 2 hours, 3 hours, and I don't sleep for like several hours, or I eat really bad food, how much is gonna kind of cost me in terms of my balance and sense of safety and control? Because it's very difficult to feel regulated when you haven't slept enough. Like your brain is all over the place. you feel more anxious. You don't know exactly what's going on. You get more forgetful. So it taxes all of the different areas of your brain functioning. So once I started understanding that, I could start setting up different explorations, like emotionally, what do I need to feel safer and more in control? What kind of information, like kind of bits of interactions, made me feel emotionally dysregulated, more anxious, more worried? What things are working better for me? For instance, I stopped watching the news whatsoever during the
Yep.
pandemic, and I started doing meditation or walking into through a park, because that helps me. And the same with the sensory needs, right? Like, what do we need in terms of the visual stimulation, how much lights I can take in the environment, and then so basically start exploring that, because before before you setting up the routine, you need to kind of understand where you're at in those aspects. I don't know if that makes sense to you.
Oh my gosh, definitely. I think that again, like we mentioned last week in our last chat about the importance of curiosity about yourself. Like it's so important. And I think it's really like amazing as you get older and you start to have more preferences, but just be more aware of them. It's so powerful. Like for me, natural light is it's just not negotiable. Like it's absolutely essential. If I realize that I stayed, like sort of college, university apartments where there were guys I used to know who like windows and curtains had just never been opened in weeks, and it wasn't important to them, or they'd have a whole TV in front of the window because they weren't, oh my gosh, I couldn't live like that. Like I needed light. Light actually makes me feel present, it makes me feel calm, it makes me feel awake. It makes you feel well. And I think it's definitely about knowing yourself and making sure that becomes part of your routine. So currently where I live now, I've got a really big blind in my bedroom. And I've realized I've decided to keep the remote control for the blind next to my bed so that when I wake up, I can open it and it's like, oh, okay, that's me present because I know that the light's there. But not having the switch there changes how willing I am to get out of bed. So it's like it's about setting yourself up for these things to work. Yeah.
Yeah,
Kind of
absolutely.
thing I was go ahead.
Sorry, continue.
It's a slightly off, like we were saying earlier about the impact of being out of routine. And I think that you do need a good routine, but your routine also has to have a certain amount of resilience. Like it can't be so stringent and so inflexible that it doesn't work in other contexts. Obviously, if you have 100% control of your life, that's fine. But in reality, no one does, especially when you've got kids. So you have to be able to have some sort of buoyancy. You have to be able to say, well, that was the plan. This is a little bit different. And that can be incredibly uncomfortable. Lots of neurodivergent people, that routine is what makes them feel calm. So that's what gets lost. And that can be a very, very dysregulating. And then when your kids also can get dysregulated. So some of that buoyancy, I think we have to think a little bit more about how we bounce back when we get a little bit out of routine. And I just think that's really important.
Absolutely. There's so many very important angles in which we can start thinking about this. One of this is like, how do you start understanding what is a good routine for you? So sometimes we think of the solution before we understand the problem. So I'm gonna say it again. Say it again. Like sometimes we try to find the solution before we really understand the problem, which means that if we start trying to set up a routine just because we want the solution right now, before we understand what we need in all these different levels, probably it's not going to be a routine that we can sustain because it's not going to be working for us. And you also touch based on another dimensions of this, like basically how can we come to a place in which a routine is flexible enough and effect working enough that we can rely on it, but leave certain room for changes, right? And it's being another vision is sometimes difficult because you can feel so out of balance, so out of control. Like for someone autistic, for instance, that's really difficult, to cope with those changes. And then it's like, how do you developing that routine over time, how long it takes habits to form, right? How much effort you need to invest at the beginning of setting up a good routine, and then it become easy over time. But it's a journey. So as a just a first step, and to start wrapping up this chat, it's like, start with the understanding. If you're watching us right now, with the understanding of your needs, and with a certain be curious, as Frankie said, like a curiosity mindset about what is actually that you need in these different levels, physically, or your physical needs, your emotional needs, your sensory needs, and start observing what happens to you when you sleep less, what happened to you when you haven't eaten, or you haven't eaten too much of the wrong food, what happened when sensory interactions, informations affect you emotionally in a certain way, what happened with the lights and the environment is noisy or not too stimulating or not stimulating enough for you. So to notice that, and then you can start moving into what is actually the routines that help you to start being more regulated, right?
Absolutely. And in instances where you do have to be out of routine, so we're thinking about Christmas, we're thinking about when you have big changes, I think it's just really important to know that when you've got that really good routine that we really want for you, if there are things coming up which you cannot adhere to your routine, it's about being really thoughtful. How can you reduce other demands and keep the things that are absolutely essential in that routine, like being aware of what those are, so that those don't get lost, even if there's big changes. And also things like giving yourself like lots of just extra compassion. And, when things have happened, even after they've returned to your routine, give yourself a little bit of recovery time. And know that like we've had, even after my husband came back and it was like, oh, they should be back to normal. It's not back to normal because you've been holding on to so much that time as well. So that can lead to lots of dysregulation. So I think it's we want you to build your routine. We want it to be flexible. And when it does have to go out of routine, we want you to know what's the most important thing to hold on to and give yourself a little bit of extra space and recovery time.
Absolutely. It's a process. It's very important what you said, because it is a process to setting up a routine. When you lose or you're out of that routine, how we go back into that routine is a process. So be kind to yourself if you're watching us. So thank you so much for watching us today, for your presence, for your interest. And if you're like interested or keep watching these episodes and our chats, like click in this link. For like where you can check out like our latest episode. And what else, like we invite them to follow us, right?
Rosie and we were just saying earlier that we could both talk for anything on any topic. So if you do happen to have a question that you'd love us to kind of chat and mull over and think about from our own neurodivergent experiences personally and also professionally, then please do let us know. We're just trying to build this community. So any way that you can contribute and be a part of that, we would absolutely love. So thank you so much.
Yes, thank you, and see you soon.
Bye.
Bye.